Hello, I am Cody Ellingham, and this is the Transformation of Value podcast. Today I talk with Te Kahukura Boynton. Te Kahukura is a young wāhine studying law and running the blog and podcast Māori Millionaire, documenting the journey of learning about financial independence and empowerment for Māori. I think there is an important opportunity for Bitcoin to empower and connect all of us, and as an antidote for the fiat culture war that is taking place in New Zealand and globally. It was great to share a little bit about Bitcoin with Te Kahukura and to discuss how it can help bring about better outcomes for every New Zealander. If you want to get in touch with me, please send an email to hello@thetransformationofvalue.com and I will get back to you. I do hope you enjoy this episode. If you would like to support the show, please consider streaming some Satoshis via your favorite podcasting 2.0 platform such as Fountain or Breeze. Otherwise, on to the show. Where are you based at the moment?
I'm living in Hamilton.
Are you originally from Hamilton?
No, I grew up in Napier and then I moved to Tokoroa and then I moved to Hamilton for uni.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. I actually grew up in Hawke's Bay myself. So,
oh, did you?
Yeah.
In Napier or Hastings? Or?
Oh, actually, Paharakeke, Flaxmere, but
really?
But not many people are familiar with it, so I just say Hastings. But I grew up there, and then I was out in Pakipaki for a little bit.
But, in the
ghetto. Yeah. It's funny though because you don't see that many people who get out, and so sort of. You know, because I left and I was travelling and did a few other things, and you come back and it's humbling, you know, because I still got a lot of family there, to just sort of see, you know, and to reconnect with those roots. But
yeah, how long have you been doing your podcast for?
Well, I started this show late last year, and it's really received great. I mean, a lot of support from various people, and I was doing another show before that, sort of during the COVID era, looking at just creativity and kind of doing your best in the situation we had. But that sort of wound up and I've started this one, which has been really, as I said, really well received, and it's opened a lot of doors to talking to different people and that. But you're also running your own show as well, right?
Yeah, the Māori Millionaire podcast. So I started mine about probably actually 12 months ago now. So yeah.
And what was the impetus for that?
I guess when I moved to uni, I had been kicked out of home. I had no money at all. So I kind of, budgeted my way, saved my way out of that situation, and figured it was like a great opportunity to just start a conversation about managing money. So, I started firstly on my blog. I think I started blogging when I was like 14, and none of them ever kind of took off. But this one, I guess I tried a bit harder and, implemented some strategies, and it's like yours, it's gotten some really good feedback. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, it's certainly, I think, really important that we talk about this, because I certainly didn't learn anything about financial literacy growing up in Flaxmere, and I certainly didn't learn anything even at university or high school. So it's like, where are the gaps in this? Because I feel like it's something that you pick up from your family and those around you. And I mean, I was lucky my parents ran a small business, so I could kind of learn a little bit of that stuff. But really, managing money, managing your future is already a challenge. And then there's more challenges on top of that with cost of living, inflation, all of this. I mean, where does someone even start?
Totally. It's a big conversation, I guess, but I'm happy I've started, and I guess I get to have these conversations, which is really cool.
Yeah. I mean, looking at it, so Māori Millionaire is your website and your podcast, and you're looking at sort of documenting this journey of financial independence and empowerment for Māori individuals and communities. Obviously money plays a critical role in our lives, and understanding how to manage and grow that can really help us achieve success. In your experience, and I guess with your background and growing up, I mean, what did you find were some of the common challenges that people face when it came to understanding money?
I guess for myself, it was that we are quite quick to jump to the status quo. So a simple 9-to-5 job, it's, what everyone else is doing. So we just do it as well. But I think for a lot of Māori in particular, we have higher rates of actually having like more financial dependence as compared to non-Māori. And so we actually generally need more money because we're supporting more people. So the, normal route of a 9 to 5 isn't even, a realistic way to get ahead for a lot of Māori. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is just kind of our mentality about what money is, how we make it, and how we actually manage it.
What does money mean for you?
Is the podcast starting? This is some good...
That's good stuff, eh?
I guess for me, it's about opportunities. So at the moment, I'm studying my law degree. I'm about halfway through. But for me, money is access to a better life, a better, just a better anything in general. So I grew up, my mum was on the benefit, and we barely had any spare money floating around. But now I'm financially supporting myself.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, the same with myself. I mean, as I said, grew up in Flaxmere. It's a pretty low income area if people don't know, but my parents ran their own business, and so I did learn some good fundamentals there. But certainly trying to get to a place where you're, because it can be very expensive to be poor. And, you spend money, you buy stuff twice, you buy low quality items, that sort of thing. There's a lot of research on that. But also the decisions you make. I was very lucky. I was the first person in my family to, go through to university, do a bachelor's degree and that sort of thing. And first person to really get out of the country, out of Hawke's Bay. So that was, quite fundamental. But then it led the way for my brother, for my cousins, other people to actually take that journey, which just wasn't really an option before. Kind of to see a pathway. And also on the flip side, I mean, where Flaxmere's also, there's a lot of pathways that are not so productive that people can take, especially with the gangs. And so looking at the pathways, money enables some of those things. And as you say, it's a sort of opportunity. It also saves you time, right? It's like money is time. If you've got the ability to pay for something, to make a problem go away, to fix things, to just, optimize your life, money can enable that in a way that you couldn't do if you couldn't afford it, then you just can't do it.
100%.
So yeah, certainly it's opportunity. But I mean, beyond that though, I mean, looking at what it really means, the opportunity is what it gives you, but what the fundamental itself, like what is the money, New Zealand dollars, that kind of the actual, currency. How do you sort of see that? What lens do you see that through?
I see money as energy. So this sounds really weird, but I see it as energy, and it comes and it goes, and depending on how you manage that energy, it can grow, it can cause burdens, it can make situations worse or better. So, but just financially, money is quite insignificant when you look at just money. The value it provides can be really significant, but money on itself is just a means for trading. So by itself, it's just money.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, and I'm smiling because what you just said is something that we people in the Bitcoin world actually often talk about, is money as energy, Bitcoin as energy, because really, the medium itself, the New Zealand dollar, really represents a transfer of energy, transfer of value, and even the title of this podcast is the transformation of value. And sometimes you've got really good ways of doing that, really strong ways, and then other times you've got weak ways of doing that. And so the New Zealand dollar is kind of okay at the moment, but if you look at the Zimbabwe dollar, if you look at the South African rand, if you look at different currencies around the world, they're no longer transferring energy. They've failed, and they've had either hyperinflation or the currency is just no longer accepted. And I think that's a really, talking about financial literacy, there's sort of the nuts and bolts of how to balance a budget and that sort of thing. But actually what is money is really hard to articulate. It's just not a paradigm that we have access to, and certainly in our education system. And for you to say that it's like energy, I mean, that really blows me away. It's something that's quite insightful that, you've come to that conclusion, because that's certainly sort of how I see it. It's it comes and it goes, and it likes to, it's a way of transferring value between people. And and that sort of transfer of value, looking at the way it's mediated in New Zealand, I mean, it's certainly problematic. And, we look at the way the banks and the Reserve Bank work, there's some real challenges there because, you've got this energy source, but it's not pure in the sense that it's losing 6, 7, 8% of its energy every year. It's sort of leaking it out through inflation. I mean, what's your take been, especially how inflation negatively impacts, a lot of Māori communities? What's your take been on the inflation situation over the last couple of years?
I think at the current point, the cost of living is so high, it's unbearable, and that's caused a lot of harm for Māori communities, or Pacific communities as well. I think anything that's struggling New Zealanders in general is going to disproportionately affect minorities and Indigenous communities. So Māori and Pacifica in particular in Aotearoa are suffering the most at this period of time, which is it's quite disheartening, I think, to see our people struggling to be able to, provide the basic necessities for their children. And it's something that I know as from a Te Ao Māori perspective, being able to provide is what our value is seen as individuals. It's what we can do for others. And if we're not able to provide those basic necessities, that's a hit, on us as a whole. So I think from that perspective, it's really challenging. But I think in total, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about inflation and what causes it and how it kind of keeps on going up. So I think a lot of people get really excited when minimum wage goes up. I don't at all get excited when it goes up because it's just going to lead to more. So I think it's a very big problem at the moment, the cost of living. I obviously don't have all the answers. But
that's okay. I mean, I agree though with you, your sentiment that it is complex. And what you said about the minimum wage, absolutely. I mean, it's for the short term, yeah, it feels good. You're getting more money. But I remember when minimum wage was $8, $9, and I feel like at that time I could have brought more with that hours of that 1 hour of my time was worth more than it would be today at that rate. At the minimum wage rate today, for example, and that's because of inflation. You're diluting the money supply. And I always say to people, it's like you've got a little thing of whiskey and you're watering it down, or Coca-Cola, whatever. You're watering it down by printing more of it, and that's not talked about in the media. I think there is beginning to be an awareness that there is a money printer, kind of this colloquial idea, but the mechanics of that are actually very hard for people to understand, and even I struggle sometimes with the complexities of it because it's a very bureaucratic process. And I always say to people, I walk past the Reserve Bank every day up on the terrace here in Wellington, and above their logo there, they've got their name, Te Putea Matua. And I always struggle with that because fundamentally what they're saying is, we've got this great gift. We're the custodians of this gift of money, but actually what they're doing is they're the ones printing the money and they're diluting it. So they're not looking after it. And I really struggle with this, this sort of paradigm that the Reserve Bank and the government have got this kind of control over the money supply. But it's not a discourse that's in the media at the moment. I don't know. What's your take on that? Looking at what's happening with the interest rates, they've just gone up 50 basis points recently, and of course that's going to affect people negatively. How can you be a guardian, a custodian of wealth when you're doing that sort of stuff?
I think that's actually puts the problem just quite right there, and it starts off with the Treaty of Waitangi, really, where our sovereignty was it's a really big issue because we don't have the power to control these situations, and this is what Māori have been fighting for years and decades, and the powers control our lives, and Māori and PI are those that suffer the most due to those. So I think overall it's something that really needs to be addressed really quickly. And I think there was something I read that it takes 3 generations or something like that to reverse kind of the effects. Even if we started implementing decolonisation methodologies it would take a long time to actually see the results of that. So when we look at like interest rates for Māori to be able to access home ownership, those would have to decrease significantly because one, we don't have the savings there to be able to get the deposit, and then two, our incomes are proportionately lower anyway, so we can't meet those mortgage rates. So I think overall, it's a very big problem that I don't believe would have happened without colonisation. We would have been able to continue living life as we were and operating under an Indigenous trading system. We didn't need, all of this, the Big Bank of New Zealand. We didn't need these things.
Yeah, no, well absolutely. I mean, you're right, to Kahukura. Like the way we've got the system set up at the moment, we can dance around it, right? And I mean, I'm here in Wellington, and everyone, I don't work for the government, but I have a lot of friends who do, and they all do their mihi. They all, follow their, their guidance on how to be appropriate, in regards to the treaty. But the reality is that the whole system is got some major problems in it, and the ones that are actually important are the ones that no one's talking about, and those are the self-sovereignty of the money system. Really, at the end of the day. And I mean, I was having a good chat with Ben Jarvie recently, who wrote the article, which I might have forwarded on to you, around New Zealand's past, putia, and future, and looking at the monetary system in New Zealand. And, his sort of argument from that article was that for actual self-sovereignty of Maori, we really need to look at the Reserve Bank and divest that of its sole control over the monetary supply, because at the moment they just do whatever they want. And we can talk about other stuff, but the money supply being controlled by this this institution, I mean, that is definitely against what was promised in the treaty. And then I guess with your regards to in regards to the other kind of order of events, I mean, looking at the history of banking more generally, and looking at, say, the history of the Bank of New Zealand, its involvement in the New Zealand Wars, some of the historical contentions around how money was used and how the business cycle was co-opted, basically to take advantage of Maori. I really learnt a lot from that. For example, looking at how there's always these boom and bust cycles in the business cycle, and making use of the bust cycle when Maori are more likely to want to have sold, to use that opportunity to buy the land, for example, historically. That was certainly a strategy, and of course these all these exist in the past, but they have echoes through to today. And I think looking at that, though, I mean, obviously this is contentious, and there's a lot of different opinions about this, but I think the root cause of it is that banking system had that fundamental flaw that it was controlled by the Crown, and I mean there were private banks as well, but and since the Reserve Bank was founded, it's been controlled by the Crown, and so fundamentally there feels like there's inequality there and sort of an unfair system. Looking here at another question I had for you, so we've established that there's this idea that there's some challenges with the way the Reserve Bank operates, the way the government operates, the way they can run a massive deficit. They can basically spend all this money on stuff that doesn't matter, and then it causes inflation, which affects low income people disproportionately. Looking at that, what do how do you see? You're obviously running your podcast. You're trying to give some advice and some insight into financial literacy and how Maori can learn from this. But I mean, what other solutions do you see? What other ways do you see that we can address this problem?
We need more Māori at the table in representation, and I think I would kind of refer to something that Simran Kaur says from Girls That Invest, and she says that she has a optometry background. She says if you want Indians to actually see how to improve their health statistics, then you need an Indian there. And it's the exact same thing for Māori. If we want to improve outcomes for lower income people, we need to have people who have a background of having low incomes. So having Māori at the table, having PI at the table, proportionately to our population, then we will see better outcomes. So I think that first and foremost needs to happen. I think a lot of redress and a lot of actual investigation into the inequities and outcomes needs to happen also. I think that overall there's a big misunderstanding that I guess from feedback I've heard from my podcast, that Māori suffer due to our own failures, and we choose the life that we live, which isn't the case. We have lower incomes and we have less successful outcomes in many different industries like the health industry or education because of systemic racism and colonisation and the impacts this has had on our people. It's not because of the decisions we make every day.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, as I said, growing up in Hawke's Bay, you can see that and feel it. Though I feel my challenge with that is also, we do live in quite a mixed country, and again, Hawke's Bay is a good example of that, where you've got Havelock North and Flaxmere, 5 minutes drive from each other, and they're two sort of polar opposites, if people know those two locations. And looking at what it means, though, why I wonder if there is a deeper cause here that can be more unifying, because I feel like systemic racism, it sort of says that there's some failings that exist throughout the system. And is there a singular point that we could point at and say, hey, this is where this issue lies, that we could look to kind of go upstream from and fix it? You know what I mean? As opposed to looking at the entire system as a failure. Like, is there key points that we could identify or at least talk about, for example, the money or the banking system, that if we were able to look at those under a microscope, do you think there would be places like that we might be able to find some insight?
I think it would. I think I work in the I don't work for the Waitangi Tribunal, but I work for a law firm that does claims to the Waitangi Tribunal, and so we investigate these issues all the time. And I think they all start at the breaches of the treaty, and that's something that we can look at straight there. And when we look at the different implications of that, so we currently have 4 different inquiries that my office looks into, and this is the health outcomes inquiry, the housing inquiry, mana wāhine, and the justice system inquiry. So these all investigate how the breaches of the treaty affect us today. And I think that by thoroughly investigating these and actually implementing the findings of these reports, we would be far on our way to preventing some of the disparities and outcomes we see. So if we're looking at one point, I guess, in history for myself, it would be the signing of the treaty. There were 2 different translations of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and when we look at international law, it says that the Indigenous version of the treaty should be upheld, but it's not in New Zealand.
Yeah, no, certainly. And I feel that if we look at these concepts, tino rangatiratanga, self-governance, self-sovereignty, there were some promises and some discussions made, and Ben Jarvie gave me some great insight into this. King Tawhio went to England to petition the Queen to set up a Māori Parliament, but also to set up a Māori bank, and sort of come back to this theme of banking and the money system. It seems like the failings of that bank, though, were because it was a full reserve bank, in the sense that every dollar that they lent out, they could back it, and it lost out to the private banks that were doing fractional reserve banking. And so there was from the beginning there was this uneven playing field, and the Maori were not before that they weren't able to issue their own money, and so they were always on the back foot with trades, and so they were trading hard assets, things like land, or goods like flax and things, for money, paper money. And though originally the New Zealand there was British pounds floating around, and then there were New Zealand pounds, that money was easily printed. You could set up a private bank and issue money, issue coins and notes, and you could start using that to buy things. And in many cases, those were hard assets. And so there was already, from the beginning, there was this sort of this issue with money that wasn't backed by anything. You know what I mean? Like, it's it seems that's quite an unfair system to employ upon people.
100%. I think when we even look at land ownership as an idea of as an asset for building wealth, pre-colonization, or actually still today, Māori don't believe in land ownership because the land is a resource. It's not a financial asset. And so even when we look at that, if Māori were returned the land that was stolen from us, that would be one key point where we would see better outcomes for Māori.
Do you think, looking at it, again, just the lens that I bring to it, which is, my own family, which have a mixed background on both sides, looking at, that kind of multicultural aspect of New Zealand today, obviously recognising there are historical injustices, but also looking to the future. Do you feel, though, that we could envisage a system where those inequalities in the monetary system and coming back to the financial literacy and the way money works, if we were to be able to bring in new thought leadership there, for example, for something like Bitcoin, which ultimately is a peer-to-peer currency. There's no reserve bank involved. There's no central banks involved. It's just a transaction between me and you. Do you think having systems in place like that would enable future generations to actually move on and develop prosperity themselves if we were to implement stuff like that today?
I think there could be benefit in a decentralized trading system. And I think I'm quite wary of new systems that are bought out, but I think there could be potential value in having a system where it's not, governed in New Zealand, and it's, an international means of trading.
Yeah. I'm curious to just dive into that a little bit, because I certainly that's sort of one of the major themes of this show is looking at Bitcoin in particular as a globally decentralized means of transferring value peer-to-peer with no trusted third party. And something that really stuck out to me was, how suited this would be to Maori communities. And, where my father lives in Porongaho, Central Hawke's Bay, there's, a lot of, cash economy. There's a lot of peer-to-peer trading going on there, just because of the nature of the place. And, it's pretty far away from anything. There's a lot of bartering. People trade firewood for meat and things like that. And it's a lot more suited to that, that kind of engagement and transaction, and for the government to come in and say, well, we're going to put 15% GST on every single transaction you do. It feels like there's something quite unfair about that, because obviously that impacts low income people a lot more. What are the challenges that you're seeing, or sort of the reservations that you have about kind of new currencies, new forms of money? What concerns do you have personally about it?
I think because it's so new, there's no real rules or legislation around how to protect minorities or low-income people as a whole. I think internationally there have been, but locally I think I would need to see a lot more kind of legislation or drafting of this to be able to have some trust in a system that could potentially work.
Yeah, that's interesting you mentioned legislation, though, because one of the things that really stands out to me with Bitcoin, it's been around 14 years now, so first launched. The white paper came out 2008, and then the network came online 2009. But in terms of trust, at the end of the day, you set up a wallet, on your phone or on your computer. You send some Bitcoin to someone else who has a wallet or a device, and that's sort of it. There's once the transaction's been sent, it's finalized. There's no cash, there's no chargebacks, there's no way to sort of cancel that, and so you do need to be very careful about what you do. But at the same time, there's nowhere along that line where it can be exploited by a middleman. And so I find it curious that you talk about legislation, but it's the ultimate in self-sovereignty, that it doesn't require the government, the state, and anyone can run it. You know what I mean? So that it feels like that it's quite a big idea to take that on. But at the same time, there's sort of no back doors. There's no way for anyone for the government, for example, to take advantage of it. And that's the power that it seems to offer.
I guess I'm quite new to this idea of different cryptocurrencies and things, but I think one of the things I have picked up on is the high volatility that it has. And if we're currently seeing that there's, it's not regulated, despite the fact that with regulations, Māori and PI haven't seen good outcomes, I'm interested to see how this could work without regulation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, that is certainly a common question we got. And that's something I was saying to you earlier, like, it is confusing. And I'm the first to admit that, there's all of these cryptocurrencies, you see them floating around and you see them go from zero to whatever. And people, it's a classic get rich quick scheme, right? And I think what I was trying to explain earlier was that, Bitcoin is different in the sense that it was the first one. There's no central party that controls it. A lot of these crypto coins and that they have like a company that's made them. Or they've got a group of people who have made them, who are quite centralized. Whereas with Bitcoin, it is completely decentralized. There's no one in control. And I mean, there's a bit of technical detail to it, but ultimately it is fully decentralized. And so no one can change the rules. And the rules are the rules. And I think that's, I guess what I'm alluding to is some of these historical injustices were because the rules were the rules, but they weren't followed. And what we now have is an opportunity for self-sovereignty, where the rules are the rules. If you send the Bitcoin to an address, it's gone to that address. You can't, shake your head and say, hey, actually, sorry, can I have it back? They have to give it back to you. They have to agree to give it back to you. You can't just take it back. And I think themes like that, when we talk about the treaty, when we talk about the historical relationships, it's because there were situations where we couldn't do that and things were able to be taken back. They were able to be, the wool was able to be pulled over people's eyes. Things like that were able to happen. And so there was these historical injustices. But having a rules-based system that is decentralized, anyone can participate. You don't have to sign up with your IID number. You don't have to sign up with your passport. You just start using it. It's something quite powerful, but also I can appreciate that it gives people pause for thought. So, yeah, looking at monetary system and how that can be, I guess, and again, coming back to this article that Ben Jarvie put out, I was really just curious about how this might work. You see these reservations and that this, financial literacy comes into this as well. I think certainly Maori or any New Zealander could look at crypto broadly, and I'm doing air quotes here, but look at crypto and say, this is a get-rich-quick scheme. What's your perception been sort of coming at this from the outside? I know you're not necessarily super deep into the Bitcoin stuff, but what's your take on the ecosystem and sort of what knowledge is out there, what perceptions are, and that sort of thing?
I think from my perspective, working in the financial literacy kind of industry, I see a lot of scams and things when it comes to crypto. So there's a lot of fears about the potential risks involved. And I haven't been able to see the same quality of reputable sources that kind of support that there are ways to do things without risk, as I assume there are. I personally don't understand them enough to talk about that, but I guess there is a lot of, even just on social media, information about crypto being, an easy way to make money or things like this. But yeah, I haven't seen the same level of information on the contrary.
Yeah, no, look, and that's absolutely understandable. And that's one of the reasons I reached out to you and really wanted to talk to you because, I live in, I live in a world where I talk to a lot of these people and I engage with a lot of people who are interested in Bitcoin. But it takes a long time to actually really understand what it means because, it's not just an investment. It's not just a get-rich-quick scheme. It's a new way to save. It's a new way to conduct business. It's a new way to think. And if you look at sort of zoom out a little bit and look at some of the structural issues that we're seeing right now with inflation, bank failures in the US, issues with the New Zealand economy, there's a lot of macro stuff there which I don't expect everyone to know about or to fully appreciate, but there's certainly some change in the air, and we're seeing that roll out now. And what I'm concerned about is if we see more control over the centralized money system which we currently have. Are you familiar with CBDCs? Is that something you've come across before? So CBDC. So this is the classic. Or this is the title of what Ben's looking at. So CBDC versus Bitcoin. So CBDC stands for Central Bank Digital Currency. And effectively what it is and what it's trying to do is do away with cash and to have a centralized single system for all, everyone to use for their money, which is controlled by the government. And what that means is that if you've got, for example, benefit payments going out, that money, that set of value that is earmarked for you can only be used in certain places, and they can really control the money in that sense, which they currently can't. It can't currently be done like that. If you've got money in your bank account, you can withdraw it as cash. You can use it for whatever you want, basically, which is, I think, the way it should be. It's your money. You should do what you want with it once it's in your account. But CBDCs, which are increasingly emerging around the world as a new way of doing things, really represent some major challenges because they really take control to the next level. And this is something we've certainly been feeling. The Reserve Bank has done a lot of, they've put out a couple of papers on this. They're actively working on a CBDC. And I guess the future that myself and other Bitcoiners talk about a lot is, a future where maybe that this is what's being, people being forced to use this. And if they do something bad, the money gets turned off. And if you turn the money off, then people can't do anything, and they become downtrodden. And for me, that's really concerning. And having an alternative to that, which is open source, decentralized, feels like it's like the right way to do things, if you know what I mean.
No, I'm actually just learning lots as you're speaking.
Yeah. Well, I'd certainly recommend, I'll send you a link later, but this basically what the Reserve Bank have done is they call it the future of innovation and private money. And they're basically looking for a mandate to do this. And I believe they will try and find one. As the current monetary system kind of runs its course and what we would call the fiat system. So fiat is a word we use. Have you heard that before?
No.
So fiat is the way we describe money that isn't backed by anything. So it comes from Latin. It's sort of it means that it's willed into existence. It's just so it has value. And so our money, New Zealand dollars. I mean, I can bust out $100, $50 note. It doesn't have any value. There's nothing attached to it. It's just paper, right? And it sounds a bit silly, right?
Yeah.
But that's fiat money. Whereas in the olden days, if you had a British pound, it was worth a certain amount of gold. In the olden days, if you had a US dollar, it was worth a certain amount of gold. And that makes sense, right? It's like it's an IOU for money, for actual money. So actual money in this case being gold. And we had that system for a number of years historically. New Zealand never did. New Zealand had New Zealand pounds, which were transferable into British pounds, which were then transferable into gold. But in the UK and in the US, they did have a gold standard. And so money was always worth something because, gold is gold, right? It's good as gold. But the problem we have today is that our money's not worth anything. It's paper. And it's not even paper, it's digital. I mean, it's sort of making sense, right? It seems a bit strange, but...
that does make sense, I guess.
Yeah, sorry, I feel like I'm coming at you with some big ideas here, but I guess the way I see it, I should say, is, money should be worth something. It shouldn't just be able to be printed, because if you and I have to work to make some money, how can someone else then go and just print it and will it into existence? How can a bureaucrat in Wellington say, all right, we're gonna just make some money happen? Or how can a bank just say we're just going to make some money happen without actually doing anything. I think that's the fundamental imbalance that I'm looking at, and I feel if we can understand that problem, if we can understand how that inequality was developed, then a lot of these injustices that we see that are, beginning to cause some major issues in New Zealand, I believe we can actually solve a lot of that, and we can at least, move forward and work together to make a better future for all of New Zealand. Because, ultimately, there's this phrase that is quite popular, which is, fix the money, fix the world. And I don't know, like, if we can't have a good guardian, a good kaitiaki of the money through the Reserve Bank, who else is going to do it? What if everyone took guardianship custody of their own money and looked after themselves? I feel like there's, and what if communities started looking after themselves? I feel like there's something quite powerful in that, where if you empower the individuals, then you empower the community, and you kind of have this grassroots development. Yeah,
100%. And I think that would be ideal. My only reservation is the fact that, there's so many people who aren't competent to manage their own money, and in those situations, I can't be assured that there are, individuals who would take care of those individuals who couldn't.
Yeah.
So when we look at, even disabled Māori who don't have any advocates for them who would manage their money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I appreciate that. Like, I'm able to say this from my office in Wellington and talk about Bitcoin, but what does it mean for people who haven't had the chance to learn about it? Who's going to teach them? I mean, there's obviously an opportunity to provide educational advice and insight for this. Though I think the technical challenges are probably less than they may seem on the outside. Like, you don't need to understand how it all works. You just need to know that it exists as an option. And I think that's what's really powerful, is that it's an alternative to this current system, which is kind of, it works, Oh, it doesn't actually work, but I had to buy something today and the FPOS machines didn't go, but I had to use cash. But sorry. But like, to know that there's an alternative, and I think that's what's really powerful. I'm just wondering, do you want to do a little experiment? Can we try something out?
Sure.
Are you on an iPhone or an Android?
iPhone.
All right. So what we're going to do, if you open up your iPhone, and go to the App Store, and go Wallet of Satoshi.
Okay. Oh, found it.
Yeah, it's like a lightning bolt sort of icon.
Yeah, got it.
And if you open that up,
cool.
It's got, I'll install it. Yeah.
And it's just loading. Yep, it's downloaded.
Sweet. So if you open it up, does it say receive and send?
Yes.
So if you click receive.
Yep.
And has it got like a QR code looking thing?
Yep.
Yep. And if you hold that up to the camera, you might have to just hold it still for a second. Boom. Did that just pop up?
Oh yes, payment received.
Okay. How much does it say?
It says about $6.
Yeah. Yeah, so $6 US is about $10 New Zealand. So kia ora, I just sent you $10.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. So
Very good transaction.
That was 20,000 Satoshis. So
wow.
1 Bitcoin.
Yes.
So do you know how many Bitcoin there are?
No.
So there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin. And then every Bitcoin has 100 million Satoshis within it. So think of it like a dollars of cents, So most people aren't probably going to have a whole Bitcoin. Currently it's about $30,000 US for a whole Bitcoin, but most people are going to transact using Satoshis, which is a smaller unit for measuring Bitcoin. So I just sent you 20,000 sats, we call them, over the Lightning Network. So there's Bitcoin, but it's sent over the Lightning Network, and it's totally peer-to-peer. You now have that money. If you want to send it to someone else, you can do that. You want to send it back to me, you can do that. But it's yours, and it's yours only. There's no government involved. There's no third party involved. What we've just undertaken is a self-sovereign transaction in the way it should be. You can't stop that transaction. You can't censor it. You can't do anything to stop you and I transacting, because if we're going to trade, then it means we're probably not going to fight. You know what I mean? And there's something quite beautiful about that, but it's also such a big idea. I think it can be quite daunting for people. But yeah, I mean, how do you feel about that?
Well, I guess I'm surprised. It was definitely, I've never done a transaction like that as quick. I actually was buying something off my friend during Easter weekend, and I transferred it on, what was it? I think Friday. And it was lunchtime today, and she sent me a message saying it still hadn't come through.
Yep. I just sent you 20,000 Satoshis over the internet by you just holding up a QR code to the video, and you've now got them instantly and forever. That's pretty cool, right?
Definitely. And so how do we spend them?
So that's the thing. At the moment where we're at is we're in the adoption phase of a new form of money called Bitcoin. And there's a few places in New Zealand that you can spend Bitcoin, you know, consumer places, restaurants and cafes. In fact, there's quite a few. Christchurch is a big one for these kinds of places, but there's a few in Wellington and other places. At the moment, though, what it is it's a store of value. So money goes through a couple of phases. So the first one is collectible. You know, it's kind of curious and interesting. People just, you know, start holding it. You know, gold, for example, it's shiny metal. It's nice. People want to hold on to it. And then the next phase is that you actually start using it as a store of value. You start just, you know, holding it. You don't intend on spending it, but it's a good way of holding your value. And then you start using it as a medium of exchange, you know, using it to buy and sell things. And then finally you start actually measuring transactions in that unit. And so we're at the kind of the store of value stage where if you buy Bitcoin, though there is volatility, which you alluded to earlier, the price goes up, the price goes down. Over a long enough time frame, if you're looking over a period of, say, 3, 4, 5 years, the price always goes up. And that's because of some fundamentals around the way Bitcoin works. There's a fixed supply. It's not like New Zealand dollars where they can just print more and more and more. Yeah. And we get 7% inflation because of that. There's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin, and currently there's a bunch that are lost, and we haven't quite got the full 21 million yet. But basically, what's out there is what we've got, and that's all that we're going to have. And so you now have a percentage of a fixed supply of the world's future money, and there's something really powerful about that. And if you hold on to it, you can build some real financial wealth. And I think that's what really excites me, is that there's an opportunity here to actually co-opt some of the imagery that the Reserve Bank plays with. They have Tane Mahuta in their lobby. And if you've seen a kauri tree, you know, it's got this sort of like cone and the seeds. The seed of, you know, a little bit of Bitcoin, if you wait 4, 8, 12 years, I mean, who knows what it's going to be worth, but certainly going to be worth a lot. And I think that's what really excites me. I don't know, like, what do you have any thoughts or ideas about that?
I think that is really exciting, I guess, to be able to hold financial resources like that. And even just the idea that, you know, my ID number's not in there. I think a lot of people are scared of, you know, big government organisations like IRD or StudyLink or whatever it might be. The fact that we've done this kind of without them is a really interesting concept for me, which I'm definitely interested to learn more about, I guess. I've definitely obviously heard of crypto and stuff. I just have never thought of it from this kind of perspective. So yeah, thank you for sharing this. I'm a very stubborn person, so you can pat yourself on the back because I don't listen to anyone. So
that's all right. Well, look, I mean, what we're doing, what we just saw was tino rangatiratanga. It's self-governance, self-sovereignty. There's no IRD involved. I just gave you some value because I enjoy your time and I appreciate your time, and that for me, that's what it's about. And if you hold on to that, and I can give you some tips later to just make sure you've secured that properly, but if you hold on to that, just due to the way the system, Bitcoin works, there's only ever going to be a fixed amount. And so as Bitcoin goes up in value, which it will as it begins to consume the world's, fiat currencies, that little bit that you have is going to be worth more and more. But the thing is, as you learn more, you'll be like, oh, actually, I don't know if I want New Zealand dollars anymore. And it's a transition that we're going through. And I mean, this is what's really, I think, gets me passionate, is because I see an opportunity here for Māori to not only, address some of these historical injustices, but to actually thrive and build, new forms of wealth, new communities, new self-sovereign businesses and things like that. And I think, there's a real opportunity for iwi to adopt this sort of thing. And if you look at the analogy of the, the seed of the giant kauri, if you put in a little bit today, and if you look at the way Bitcoin works with the halving schedule and a few other technical details, which mean that over time it always goes up in value as relative to fiat currencies, it's very prudent, I think, for iwi and Māori to look at this as an opportunity, not necessarily as a replacement for the New Zealand dollar right now. You can't use it for everything, but certainly as a replacement for saving in New Zealand, New Zealand bank accounts, which if you're saving, you're getting 2% interest and it's 7% inflation, you're losing 5% every year. I mean, that's certainly going to be affecting people, who maybe cannot afford to get into assets like houses. I mean, have you found that, like, people trying to save money in bank accounts or things like that?
Yeah, and I think there's a kind of lack of understanding about how to invest to prevent leaving your money in a bank account, or fear for leaving your money anywhere other than a bank account, even when there's supporting evidence to show that it's probably best not in your bank account.
Well, the thing is, as well as, like, why should you have to learn how to do sharesies and how to do hatch and all of this stuff? Like, all I expect is to work hard, do a hard day's work, put my money in the bank, and that it's not going to lose its value. Like, is that too much to ask for? You know what I mean? And it feels like, even for my parents, I don't know about you, but like they could, like, at least put the money away and then they get a bit of interest. But now it's like that's not even possible. And so that leads to the financialization of everything else. And so we've got house prices going through $1 million bucks, average house price. We've got cost of living going up. We've got all of these things that are sort of symptoms of a failing monetary system, but no one seems to be really asking the big questions about why that is. And I think, as I said, at the beginning, coming from this sort of low income area, I can see that it's like when you're in that place, when you're in that debt trap, when you're doing higher purchases on stuff and you're just trying to make ends meet, you don't have the mental capacity to even think about, oh man, what am I going to do on the stock market? It's like you just want to put your money away and have a rest, right? You've done a hard day's work. And I know your podcast is sort of trying to help give some insight and knowledge for that, but if there was just something like Bitcoin that you can just buy and hold, don't have to think about it, and then you come back to it a year later, 5 years later, and it's worth more, and it's preserved your purchasing power and your energy that you talked about before. I don't know. I feel like there's something quite powerful about that.
Yeah, I could definitely agree that there is something powerful about that.
Yeah.
Potential.
Yeah. So I think at a high level, looking at, again, coming back, there is this thing called crypto out there, which can lead a lot of people down the wrong track, I believe, primarily because it's not a fixed supply. It's not decentralized. It's kind of run by a bit of, some scammers and things like that. And it's very similar. It seems like it's similar to Bitcoin. And there's a lot of negativity towards Bitcoin. And a lot of that's challenging because Bitcoin doesn't have any company. There's no centralized institution. And so it doesn't always have the ability to fight back in the media. And so it kind of gets picked on a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's been running 14 years. It's gone from basically zero to $30,000 US per Bitcoin. You can buy just a small amount. You don't have to buy a whole coin. As I said before, one Bitcoin is 100 million Satoshis. I just sent you 20,000 Satoshis, like $10 New Zealand. That value, if you look at it over the long enough time frame, is always going to go up as people start thinking, hey, I don't want to be part of this anymore. And I think that's what really excites me, is that I can see my whānau back home. I can see my family actually getting into this. Putting a little bit away, even $100, put it away for 4 years, see what happens, and I think that's something that can really give me a lot of hope for New Zealand, alongside just general financial literacy around, budgeting and things like that as well. But yeah, that's my take on it.
No, that's awesome. I've learned a lot.
No, all good. Well, hey, look, we've discussed a few things. I got you onto Wallet of Satoshi. We've talked about sort of some of these systematic issues with the monetary system in New Zealand, some of your background. If people want to follow your show, your work, kind of what your journey, what's the best way for them to do that?
So I've got Instagram at Māori Millionaire with an underscore, same with TikTok. Or if you just search the Māori Millionaire podcast and blog, it will come up on Google, available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you stream your podcasts.
Yeah, certainly. I stream my podcast through a place called Fountain as well, which is quite cool. People can send little bits of Bitcoin to me as they listen, so it's quite a cool little idea as well. But I feel like I'm just conscious of time, but I feel like we've covered quite a lot today. What we would do well to do to Kahukura would be to come back at some point in the future and do another show. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
That sounds like a really good idea once I've got some more education about this. And I think I a lot to learn, and I think I could add some better insights with that knowledge.
And the reason why I want to do that is because I know you're doing really well. You're doing good mahi to communicate these these concepts through podcasts and that. And there's a real opportunity, to be an educator here. I feel that if you can, I have my show, which is, I guess, more focused on the transformational aspects, but in terms of the nuts and bolts of empowering Māori communities and, New Zealanders through Bitcoin and through other, financial literacy advice and education, if you could, share a bit of that with your listeners, I feel like there's some real value there to, I guess, help them find the right way, because there is, as I said, a lot of challenges for people who don't know anything about it. They might fall down the rabbit hole of, some of these crypto scams that are really not productive for anyone. And maybe if there's something that you were able to take up, share with your audience, I feel like that could be really powerful for New Zealanders,
I agree. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Hey, I really appreciate it, and I'll put your details as well in the show notes so people can follow along, but I do hope we can catch up again soon.
Yeah, me too.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Kia ora. All right, thank you.
Ka kite.
All right.